Genghis Khan's brutal torture methods that went too far. His father, Yesujay, was a respected tribal leader, but Temujin's early years were marked by constant danger. The Mongolian landscape was wild and cruel, with icy winters, scorching summers, and limited resources. The tribes often fought each other over grazing land, water, and livestock. This constant struggle for survival shaped Temujin from a young age, teaching him the importance of strength, cunning, and loyalty. When Temujin was still a child, his father was poisoned by rival tribes. The loss left his family vulnerable. Without a strong protector, Temujin, his mother Holan, and his siblings faced immediate hardship. They were abandoned by their clan, forced to survive alone in the wilderness. Life became a daily battle. Hunting for food, protecting themselves from wild animals, and enduring the severe climate were only part of their struggle. Despite these hardships, Temujin's mother instilled in him a sense of determination and resilience. She taught him that leadership required patience, intelligence, and an unyielding will. Even as a young boy, Temujin showed signs of remarkable leadership. He was observant and learned quickly from the world around him. He noticed how the stronger tribes dominated the weaker ones, and how alliances could be formed to survive conflicts. His early experiences with betrayal and hardship made him wary of trusting others easily, but they also taught him the importance of loyalty. He learned that life on the steppe was harsh, and only those who could think strategically and act decisively could hope to survive. As Temujin grew older, he began forming his own small group of followers. He was known for his fairness within the tribe and for rewarding loyalty, qualities that quickly earned him respect. Unlike many leaders of his time, he valued merit over birthright. Those who were skilled warriors or wise advisors could rise in his ranks, regardless of their family background. This approach was unusual in the Mongol tribes, where leadership was often inherited. Temujin's focus on ability and loyalty allowed him to gather a group of devoted allies who shared his vision of uniting the Mongolian tribes. Temujin's rise to power was not easy. The steppe was filled with rival clans, each with their own leaders and ambitions. Conflicts and betrayals were common. In his late teens, Temujin was captured by a rival clan and enslaved for a period. This experience left a lasting mark on him, deepening his understanding of human nature and the consequences of weakness. He realized that leadership was not just about strength in battle, but also about intelligence, strategy, and knowing when to show mercy or fear. These lessons would guide him for the rest of his life. After regaining his freedom, Temujin began consolidating power. He formed alliances with other tribes through marriages, promises of protection, and demonstrations of his strength. One of his most important alliances was with his blood brother, Jamaka. Together, they initially aimed to unite the Mongol tribes under a single banner. However, their alliance was fragile, and disagreements soon arose. Temujin believed in merit and fairness, while Jamaka adhered to the old traditions, favoring only those of noble birth. This difference in philosophy eventually led to a bitter conflict between the two, forcing Temujin to prove his strength and leadership abilities on the battlefield. Temujin's military strategies were already beginning to set him apart from other tribal leaders. He was known for his discipline and innovative tactics. While other tribes relied on sheer numbers and brute force, Temujin emphasized organization, speed, and surprise. He trained his warriors rigorously and rewarded them based on performance. This approach created a highly motivated and loyal army, capable of achieving feats that other tribes could not. Even in these early battles, it became clear that Temujin was not an ordinary leader. He had the vision and intelligence to unite a fragmented land under his rule. The Mongolian tribes at the time were deeply divided, with constant skirmishes and feuds. Temujin's ability to navigate this complex web of relationships was remarkable. He combined diplomacy with military might, knowing when to negotiate and when to fight. He also understood the psychological aspect of leadership, using fear and respect to maintain order within his growing following. This dual approach allowed him to expand his influence steadily, gradually becoming a unifying figure among the Mongols. People began to see him not just as a strong warrior, but as a leader with a vision for a greater Mongolia. Temujin also faced challenges from within his own family. His siblings had their own ambitions, and rivalries sometimes arose. However, he was skilled at maintaining loyalty through trust and careful management. He ensured that those who supported him were protected and rewarded, while those who opposed him were removed from positions of influence. This balance of reward and discipline was central to his growing power. Over time, it allowed Temujin to build a structured leadership system that could withstand internal challenges and external threats alike. By the time he reached his 20s, Temujin had already proven himself to be a formidable leader. He had survived betrayal, slavery, and harsh conditions, and had begun to unite several Mongol tribes under his command. His reputation for both fairness and ruthlessness spread across the steppe. People knew that he was a leader who would reward loyalty and punish treachery, and this reputation attracted more followers to his cause. His growing strength made it clear that he was destined for greatness, and the Mongolian tribes began to see him as more than just a local leader. They began to see him as the future of a unified Mongol nation. Temujin's early life experiences also shaped his understanding of justice and punishment. He witnessed firsthand the chaos that could arise from weak leadership and unfair treatment. This understanding would later influence the strict codes and laws he imposed as Genghis Khan. While he was capable of extreme ruthlessness, he also valued order and justice, believing that strong, consistent rules were essential for a stable society. His ability to balance fear with fairness was a key factor in his eventual success, as a leader of one of the largest empires the world had ever seen. By the late 1180s, Temujin had emerged as a powerful and respected leader among the Mongols. His combination of personal courage, strategic brilliance, and understanding of human nature allowed him to rise above the constant tribal conflicts that had plagued the steppe for generations. The alliances he built, the battles he won, and the loyalty he commanded set the stage for his transformation into Genghis Khan, the great Khan who would go on to reshape the world. Despite his youth, Temujin's life had already been a journey of survival, learning, and leadership. The harsh lessons of his childhood, betrayal, loss, and struggle, had forged him into a man capable of commanding loyalty, fear, and respect in equal measure. These early experiences laid the foundation for the extraordinary military campaigns and strategies that would later make him legendary. In this first chapter of his life, it is clear that Genghis Khan's rise was not born from privilege or chance. It was the result of resilience, intelligence, and an unyielding will to survive and lead. His story reminds us that even in the harshest environments, leadership is shaped not just by strength, but by the ability to learn from every challenge and to turn adversity into opportunity. As Temujin grew into adulthood, his understanding of power, leadership, and human nature deepened. He had learned from his early struggles that survival on the Mongolian steppe required more than physical strength. It required intelligence, strategy, and the ability to influence people. By this time, he had already begun uniting small groups of warriors and tribes under his command. However, Temujin realized that true control would only come when people not only obeyed him out of loyalty, but also feared the consequences of disobedience. Temujin's use of fear was not born from cruelty alone. It was a carefully calculated strategy. He understood that when his enemies knew the consequences of resistance, they would surrender more quickly, sparing lives and resources. Similarly, his allies and followers would remain loyal if they knew he would reward faithfulness and punish betrayal. This balance of respect and fear became a cornerstone of his leadership philosophy, shaping the way he expanded his influence across the steppe. The Mongolian tribes were historically independent and fiercely protective of their own autonomy. No single leader had ever successfully united them for long. Temujin's approach was revolutionary. He combined diplomacy, strategic marriages, and alliances with decisive military action. He rewarded those who joined him willingly, often granting them positions of authority regardless of their tribal background. At the same time, he sent a clear message to those who resisted. Defiance would come at a high cost. His reputation for both fairness and ruthless efficiency quickly spread, making him a figure that other tribes respected and feared simultaneously. One of the most effective ways Temujin used fear was through his treatment of defeated enemies. He understood that small acts of mercy or punishment could send powerful messages. In battles where tribes surrendered without resistance, He often spared the population and integrated them into his growing empire. However, those who refused to submit faced harsh consequences. Temujin believed that demonstrating the consequences of rebellion would prevent future uprisings. This method, while strict, helped him maintain control over vast areas of land and diverse groups of people, long before he became the Great Khan. Temujin also used fear internally, ensuring that his own followers remained disciplined and loyal. He established a clear system of laws, known as the yasa, which outlined the expectations and punishments for various actions. Loyalty, honesty, and obedience were rewarded, while betrayal, theft, or cowardice were punished severely. This system created a sense of order and security among his followers. Everyone knew where they stood and what was expected of them, which minimized chaos and internal conflicts. Soldiers were motivated not just by personal gain, but by a deep understanding of consequences and rewards. Psychology played a major role in Temujin's leadership. He understood human behavior better than most of his contemporaries. He recognized that fear could be a tool when balanced with fairness and honor. For example, he might show mercy to a surrendered leader but publicly humiliate them to emphasize the importance of submission. This careful balance allowed him to expand his influence without constant warfare, as many tribes chose to join him voluntarily rather than face potential punishment. By using fear wisely, he reduced the number of battles needed to conquer new territories. Another element of Temujin's strategy was his reputation for decisiveness. Leaders and tribes were more likely to obey someone who acted quickly and with purpose. Hesitation or indecision could be perceived as weakness, inviting challenges from rivals. Temujin rarely hesitated. He made swift decisions in battle, in diplomacy, and in enforcing his laws. This decisiveness reinforced his authority and contributed to the growing fear and respect he inspired. People knew that Temujin would act without delay, and this predictability made him a formidable opponent. Temujin's campaigns also involved clever psychological tactics to intimidate enemies before battles even began. He used small, disciplined groups of warriors to conduct raids that created fear and uncertainty among rival tribes. These raids were not just about taking resources, they were about demonstrating the consequences of defiance. Word of his efficiency and ruthlessness spread quickly across the steppe, making tribes reconsider resistance even before any fighting occurred. Many surrendered voluntarily, avoiding bloodshed, because the fear of what might happen under Temujin's leadership was enough to convince them. Even in his alliances, Temujin's understanding of fear and respect was evident. He knew that loyalty could not be assumed, it had to be earned and maintained. Allies were given responsibilities and privileges, but they were also reminded of the consequences of betrayal. Through clear communication and consistent actions, Temujin ensured that loyalty was genuine rather than forced. His ability to balance kindness with severity allowed him to maintain strong coalitions, even among groups with long-standing rivalries. One of the most notable aspects of Temujin's leadership was his ability to combine fear with hope. While enemies feared his retribution, allies were inspired by the rewards of loyalty. Soldiers and tribes joining his cause could rise in rank, receive protection, and gain wealth. This combination of fear and opportunity created a strong motivation for people to follow him. Temujin's leadership style was not based solely on intimidation. It was based on calculated influence, where both positive and negative consequences shaped behavior. This approach was particularly effective in larger campaigns. As Temujin expanded his influence, he encountered more organized and resistant tribes. By this time, he had refined his strategy. He would first assess the strengths and weaknesses of his opponents, then use a combination of negotiation, strategic pressure, and, if necessary, force. His enemies quickly learned that resistance was costly, while surrender could bring safety and integration into his empire. The fear of punishment, combined with the promise of reward, made his expansion smoother and more efficient than that of previous Mongol leaders. Temujin's use of fear was not without controversy. Some contemporaries criticized his harsh punishments, arguing that they were too severe. However, he believed that strict enforcement of rules and consequences was essential for maintaining order in a chaotic environment. Without fear, he reasoned, loyalty could be fickle, and the Mongol tribes might fall back into endless infighting. In his view, the temporary discomfort caused by fear and discipline was necessary for long-term stability and the creation of a unified Mongol nation. Even as Temujin grew more powerful, he continued to rely on intelligence and observation to guide his decisions. He listened carefully to his advisors and scouts, assessed information from defeated enemies, and adapted his strategies based on changing circumstances. This careful planning, combined with the psychological impact of fear, made him a leader who was not only physically strong but also mentally formidable. Tribes and enemies alike realized that Temujin's power was not random. It was calculated, inevitable, and backed by a keen understanding of human nature. By the end of his campaigns in Mongolia, Temujin had successfully united nearly all of the Mongol tribes under his leadership. His reputation for both strict justice and strategic fear had solidified his position as the dominant power on the steppe. Tribes that once fought endlessly among themselves now recognized the benefits of unity under a strong and disciplined leader. Fear, respect, and opportunity had become the tools by which Temujin created the foundation of what would later become one of the largest empires in history. Temujin's approach to leadership through fear was not about cruelty for its own sake. It was a calculated method to establish control, ensure loyalty, and maintain order in a turbulent world. He understood that true power required more than brute force. It required the ability to influence, predict, and guide human behavior. The fear he inspired was both a deterrent to rebellion and a motivator for cooperation. In this way, Temujin transformed the concept of leadership among the Mongols, blending psychological strategy with military skill to create a model that had never been seen before in the region. As the Mongols prepared to move beyond the steppes, Temujin's understanding of fear and control would prove essential. The foundation he built through careful management of loyalty, punishment, and reputation allowed him to extend his influence to distant lands. Cities and kingdoms beyond Mongolia would soon come to know the consequences of defying Genghis Khan. But before that, he had to master the delicate balance of respect and fear at home, ensuring that the Mongol tribes were united, disciplined, and ready for the challenges ahead. Through all of this, one thing was clear. Temujin's rise was not only about physical conquest, but also about conquering the minds of those around him. By using fear wisely, he created a system where loyalty was earned, rebellion was minimized, and his authority became absolute. This combination of psychological insight, strict discipline, and strategic foresight would define his leadership style for the rest of his life and lay the groundwork for the empire he was destined to build. In the end, Temujin's use of fear and control was not just a tool for survival, it was a strategy for building a lasting legacy. By balancing punishment with reward, intimidation with opportunity, he forged a united Mongol nation capable of achieving greatness on a scale that the world had never seen. The lessons he learned in his early life, about betrayal, hardship, and resilience, had come full circle, guiding him in shaping the Mongols into a disciplined, loyal, and powerful force under his command. As Temujin's power grew, he transformed from a strong tribal leader into a military genius. By now known as Genghis Khan, he had mastered the art of war and understood that victory depended not only on the strength of his army but also on strategy, planning, and careful calculation. He was not just a warrior, he was a thinker. Every battle, every conquest, and every negotiation was carefully planned. His reputation was no longer only about fear and respect. It was also about the intelligence and precision with which he conducted his campaigns. Genghis Khan's army was unlike any other in the world at that time. While most armies relied on sheer numbers or brute force, he focused on organization, speed, and discipline. His soldiers were trained to move quickly across vast distances, communicate efficiently, and execute complex tactics. They rode on horseback for long distances, often covering more ground in a day than entire armies of other nations could manage in a week. This mobility allowed Genghis Khan to strike suddenly, catching his enemies off guard. The Mongol warriors could appear where no one expected them, giving them a critical advantage in both psychological and physical warfare. Part of Genghis Khan's strategy involved careful planning of sieges. He understood that cities and fortresses were difficult to conquer, because they were designed to protect their inhabitants. But he also knew that patience, intelligence, and the right tools could overcome almost any defense. Genghis Khan and his generals studied maps, gathered information from scouts and spies, and analyzed the weaknesses of every target. Once they had a plan, they executed it with precision. The combination of preparation, patience, and tactical innovation made the Mongols almost unstoppable. The Mongols also used psychological tactics to weaken their enemies before battles even began. Genghis Khan understood that fear could defeat armies before a single arrow was fired. Before attacking a city, his army might send small groups to raid surrounding villages, destroy supplies, and spread stories of the consequences of resistance. This created panic and lowered morale among the defenders. Often, entire populations surrendered without a fight, preferring safety under Mongol rule to the uncertainty of a violent battle. By using fear strategically, Genghis Khan reduced the number of lives lost, both among his soldiers and civilians. Despite the fear he inspired, Genghis Khan also knew the value of discipline within his own ranks. Soldiers were strictly organized into units with clear responsibilities and leaders. Obedience, loyalty, and efficiency were rewarded, while disobedience or cowardice was punished. This level of discipline made the Mongol army highly reliable and adaptable. Each soldier knew his role, understood the consequences of failure, and trusted that his leaders would reward skill and courage. This combination of fear, respect, and organization created one of the most effective armies in history. In combat, Genghis Khan often used clever tactics that exploited both the terrain and the psychology of his enemies. He employed feigned retreats to lure opponents into traps, ambushes to strike at the most vulnerable moments, and coordinated attacks that overwhelmed even the most fortified armies. His soldiers were trained to act as a single unit, moving quickly and decisively. These tactics, combined with the fear he had cultivated among rival leaders, often caused enemy armies to break apart even before full-scale battles began. The Mongol army also made use of intelligence and spies. Genghis Khan believed that knowing the enemy's movements, strengths, and weaknesses was essential for success. Scouts would gather information about fortifications, supply routes, and troop movements. Diplomats and informants were sometimes used to sow distrust among enemy leaders. By understanding both the physical and psychological aspects of warfare, Genghis Khan ensured that he always had an advantage. His careful planning meant that when battles occurred, they were usually fought on his terms. Genghis Khan's treatment of conquered cities was another aspect of his military strategy. He often offered terms of surrender to towns and leaders. If a city surrendered without resistance, its population might be spared, allowed to keep their property, and integrated into the Mongol Empire. This approach encouraged cooperation and reduced unnecessary bloodshed. However, if a city resisted, the consequences could be severe. The punishment was designed not just to defeat that particular city, but also to send a clear message to others about the cost of rebellion. This method, harsh as it may seem, was highly effective in creating long-term stability and compliance within his growing empire. Even when dealing with prisoners, Genghis Khan used a combination of fear and strategy. Captured leaders were often treated in ways that emphasized both mercy and power. Some were integrated into his administration, using their knowledge and skills for the benefit of the Mongols. Others were held to demonstrate the consequences of resistance. These actions were calculated to reinforce his authority and ensure that people understood the consequences of defiance. It was a system based not only on punishment, but also on incentive, combining fear and opportunity in a way that few leaders of the time could match. One of Genghis Khan's most famous campaigns was against the Khwarezm Empire, a wealthy and powerful kingdom in Central Asia. The conflict began over trade disputes and distrust between leaders, but Genghis Khan's approach quickly escalated the situation. He sent diplomats to negotiate, but when they were mistreated, he responded with overwhelming military force. His army moved swiftly, conquering cities one after another. The speed, organization, and psychological tactics of the Mongols overwhelmed the defenders. Many cities surrendered without resistance once the reputation of the Mongol army became clear. This campaign demonstrated not only Genghis Khan's military skill, but also his ability to use fear, intelligence, and strategy to achieve his goals. Genghis Khan's tactics were not limited to large armies or fortified cities. He also excelled in smaller, more personal forms of warfare. Raids, ambushes, and surprise attacks were used to weaken enemies, disrupt supplies, and prevent coordinated resistance. Cavalry units moved quickly across the terrain, striking at key points and disappearing before counterattacks could be organized. These tactics required careful training, precise timing, and an understanding of human behavior. By mastering both large-scale and small-scale operations, Genghis Khan created an army capable of defeating nearly any opponent. While many feared Genghis Khan's methods, his approach was always strategic. He did not act out of cruelty alone. Every tactic, every siege, and every punishment was designed to achieve a purpose: to protect his empire, maintain order, and ensure long-term success. He understood that unchecked cruelty could backfire, but calculated fear combined with discipline and opportunity created a powerful and lasting influence. His ability to think several steps ahead allowed him to remain in control, even in complex and dangerous situations. Another factor in Genghis Khan's success was his ability to adapt. He learned from every battle, every campaign, and every interaction with enemies. If a tactic did not work, he modified it. If a strategy was too harsh, he adjusted the consequences. This flexibility, combined with careful planning, made him an unpredictable and effective leader. His enemies never knew exactly what to expect, which added to the fear and uncertainty that gave the Mongols a psychological advantage before battles even began. Despite the brutality often associated with his campaigns, Genghis Khan's methods also had practical benefits. By using fear and discipline strategically, he minimized prolonged conflicts and reduced unnecessary loss of life among his own forces. Cities that surrendered were spared, preserving resources and population. His army's efficiency allowed him to expand the empire rapidly, ensuring that new territories could be integrated quickly and effectively. These methods demonstrated a level of planning, intelligence, and foresight that set him apart from other leaders of his time. Through all these campaigns, Genghis Khan's reputation continued to grow. Tales of his speed, intelligence, and ruthlessness spread far beyond Mongolia. Leaders in distant lands learned to respect and fear the Mongols, often choosing negotiation and submission over resistance. His use of calculated fear, discipline, and strategy created a legacy that would endure long after his death. The Mongol army became not just a force of strength, but a symbol of precision, intelligence, and the consequences of defiance. By the end of this period, Genghis Khan had established himself as more than a conqueror. He was a strategist, a disciplinarian, and a master of psychological warfare. His understanding of human behavior, his ability to plan and execute complex operations, and his use of fear and reward had transformed the Mongols into a unified, powerful force. This combination of intellect and strength ensured that the empire he was building would be one of the largest and most influential in history. Genghis Khan's story in this phase of his life is a testament to the power of careful strategy, intelligence, and the thoughtful use of fear. He demonstrated that true leadership requires more than strength. It requires insight, discipline, and the ability to influence others in ways that achieve both short-term success and long-term stability. The Mongol Empire's rise was not accidental. It was the result of careful planning, innovative tactics, and the ability to understand and guide human behavior. In this way, Genghis Khan's infamous methods of warfare were not merely acts of cruelty but tools of leadership, designed to unify, protect, and expand his empire. Every siege, raid, and campaign served a purpose. Every action was calculated to achieve maximum effect with minimum waste. His ability to combine strategy, fear, and discipline made him one of the greatest military leaders in history and laid the foundation for the empire that would influence the world for generations. As Genghis Khan's empire grew, his methods of conquest became increasingly extreme. Even by the standards of the time, his early campaigns had taught him that fear was a powerful tool for maintaining control. But as he moved into new territories, the consequences of his actions became more visible. While his strategies had been highly effective in uniting the Mongols and defeating enemies quickly, there were moments when the intensity of his campaigns caused devastation that went beyond what was necessary for victory. These extreme measures, though part of his approach to leadership, sometimes produced unexpected challenges and long-lasting consequences. One of the most notable aspects of Genghis Khan's campaigns was his treatment of cities that resisted Mongol authority. In regions such as Khwarazm and northern China, some cities refused to surrender despite warnings. In response, Genghis Khan deployed his forces with precision and determination. The cities that resisted faced total destruction. Walls were breached, and entire populations were sometimes displaced or killed. Though the Mongols often spared those who surrendered immediately, the punishment for resistance was designed to be a lesson for others. This approach was effective in establishing control, but it also caused significant human and economic loss. Entire communities were disrupted, and generations were affected by the consequences of such strict measures. In addition to the destruction of cities, Genghis Khan's methods included psychological tactics that, while effective, could be extremely harsh. Reports from the time describe how certain leaders and soldiers were treated to demonstrate the consequences of defiance. Some were publicly humiliated, while others were executed in ways meant to instill fear among neighboring populations. These actions were calculated to prevent rebellion, but they also created a reputation for extreme ruthlessness that sometimes made alliances more difficult to maintain. Even allies occasionally expressed concern over the severity of his actions, fearing that excessive punishment could undermine trust and cooperation. Despite these risks, Genghis Khan continued to employ extreme measures when he deemed them necessary. His approach was always strategic, but there were moments when the intensity of his campaigns went beyond what was strictly required for military success. For example, during the conquest of Khwarazm, a series of retaliatory campaigns followed after a diplomatic incident. The Mongol army moved swiftly through cities and towns, and many were destroyed even after initial resistance was neutralized. These campaigns demonstrated Genghis Khan's commitment to enforcing obedience, but they also highlighted the potential for consequences that could affect entire regions for years to come. Genghis Khan's approach to punishment and retribution was deeply connected to his understanding of loyalty and control. He believed that any sign of weakness or hesitation could embolden rivals, so he often acted decisively and without delay. This strict enforcement of rules helped maintain order within the Mongol Empire, but it sometimes caused suffering for those caught in the middle. Ordinary people, who had no power or influence, were often affected by measures designed to send a message to leaders and decision-makers. While the intent was strategic, the results could be far-reaching, affecting communities and economies in ways that were difficult to repair. Even within his own army, Genghis Khan maintained strict discipline. Soldiers who disobeyed orders or showed cowardice faced harsh consequences. While this system ensured efficiency and loyalty, it also created a climate of fear within the ranks. Some soldiers were motivated by ambition and reward, while others acted out of caution, seeking to avoid punishment. The balance between loyalty, fear, and motivation was delicate, and Genghis Khan had to navigate it carefully to maintain cohesion and effectiveness among his forces. Any miscalculation could weaken his army or reduce the efficiency of his campaigns. The extreme nature of some of Genghis Khan's campaigns also created challenges for governance after conquest. While fear and discipline were effective tools for initial control, they did not automatically create stable, long-term governance. In some regions, local populations were deeply traumatized by the campaigns, making integration into the empire more complex. Administrators had to balance enforcement of Mongol laws with sensitivity to local customs and traditions. Genghis Khan's leadership was brilliant in conquest, but the aftermath of his more extreme actions required careful management to prevent unrest and rebellion. One of the key lessons from this period of his life was that even a powerful and strategic leader could face limits when using extreme methods. Genghis Khan understood the necessity of strong leadership, but he also had to recognize when the intensity of his campaigns risked undermining long-term stability. The destruction of cities, displacement of populations, and psychological impact on both allies and enemies demonstrated the potential downsides of relying too heavily on fear as a tool. While effective in the short term, excessive punishment could lead to resentment, resistance, or economic decline in conquered areas. In some cases, Genghis Khan's extreme methods had unintended consequences. Leaders who survived campaigns sometimes sought revenge in the future, alliances shifted unexpectedly, and some regions became more difficult to govern than anticipated. Even allies who initially supported him could grow wary of the severity of his punishments. These situations required careful diplomatic management, negotiation, and sometimes moderation in order to maintain the integrity of the empire. The lessons from these experiences highlighted the importance of balancing strength with strategic restraint. Despite these challenges, Genghis Khan continued to expand his empire, applying lessons learned from each campaign. He recognized that extreme measures were most effective when combined with strategic calculation and careful planning. His army moved with speed, intelligence, and discipline, but the consequences of resistance were always visible and severe. In this way, Genghis Khan's campaigns maintained a delicate balance between conquest, order, and long-term governance. He demonstrated that leadership in a complex and often chaotic world required not only power, but also wisdom, adaptability, and foresight. Genghis Khan's campaigns also left a lasting impact on culture and history. Cities that had resisted Mongol authority often faced destruction, but regions that surrendered or aligned with him sometimes prospered under Mongol rule. Trade routes were expanded, communication networks improved, and systems of law and order were established. These positive outcomes were made possible through careful governance, but they were built upon a foundation of fear and discipline. The duality of his methods, destruction and construction, punishment and reward, was a hallmark of his leadership style. The extreme nature of some campaigns also shaped how Genghis Khan was remembered by history. In some accounts, he was depicted as a ruthless conqueror whose methods were severe and uncompromising. In others, he was seen as a brilliant strategist who understood the complexities of leadership and governance. Both perspectives are true. His actions were often harsh, but they were also guided by intelligence, planning, and a vision for unity. The balance between fear and respect, punishment and reward, played a critical role in the success and longevity of his empire. By the end of this period, it was clear that Genghis Khan's extreme methods had both benefits and costs. On one hand, they allowed him to conquer vast territories, establish authority, and maintain loyalty among his followers. On the other hand, they caused significant suffering, disrupted societies, and sometimes created challenges for governance after conquest. The legacy of this phase of his leadership demonstrates that even powerful leaders must carefully consider the consequences of their actions, especially when relying on fear and discipline as tools of control. Genghis Khan's ability to recognize the impact of his actions and adapt his approach was one of his greatest strengths. While he continued to use fear strategically, he also learned to balance it with diplomacy, reward, and integration. Cities that surrendered voluntarily were treated with respect, trade and communication were encouraged, and local leaders were often incorporated into the Mongol administration. This combination of strength and adaptability allowed the Mongol Empire to not only expand rapidly, but also remain stable over time, despite the challenges posed by earlier extreme campaigns. In this period of his life, Genghis Khan also demonstrated the importance of foresight. He understood that leadership was not only about immediate victories, but also about long-term influence. By carefully considering the consequences of his extreme actions, he was able to adjust strategies, manage potential risks, and maintain control over an increasingly diverse empire. The lessons learned from campaigns that went too far shaped his approach in later years, making him even more effective as a leader, strategist, and unifier of vast territories. Through all of these experiences, Genghis Khan's story highlights the complexities of leadership. Extreme methods can bring quick success, but they can also create lasting challenges. A leader must weigh the benefits of fear and discipline against the potential consequences for communities, allies, and long-term stability. Genghis Khan's ability to navigate these challenges, learn from them, and adapt his approach contributed to the enduring success and influence of the Mongol Empire. In conclusion, the period when Genghis Khan's methods went too far illustrates both the power and the risks of extreme leadership. His campaigns were marked by intelligence, discipline, and strategic brilliance, but they also revealed the consequences of excessive force. The balance between fear and reward, punishment and mercy, destruction and construction was delicate and required careful management. Genghis Khan's experiences during this time highlight the importance of foresight, adaptability, and the careful use of power in achieving lasting success. As Genghis Khan grew older, his reputation as a military genius and a fearsome leader spread far beyond the steppes of Mongolia. By this time, he had conquered vast territories, united the Mongol tribes, and established an empire that stretched across Asia. Yet, his story was more than a tale of battles and conquests. It was also a story about how one man's vision, discipline, and strategic thinking could shape the course of history. The legacy of Genghis Khan is complex, a combination of incredible achievement and the harsh consequences of his methods, showing how leadership and power leave lasting marks on the world. One of the most remarkable aspects of Genghis Khan's legacy was the size and organization of the Mongol Empire. No empire before him had expanded so rapidly or controlled such a vast region. From the deserts of Central Asia to the forests of northern China, his empire included diverse peoples, languages, and cultures. Genghis Khan recognized that managing such a large and varied population required more than fear and military strength. He created systems of communication, governance, and trade that allowed the empire to function effectively. Postal routes were established, laws were codified, and local leaders were often incorporated into the administration. These innovations helped maintain order and stability across a vast and diverse empire. Despite the vastness of his empire, Genghis Khan was aware that power alone was not enough. Respect, loyalty, and cooperation were equally important. He used a combination of rewards and recognition to motivate his followers and allies. Skilled warriors were promoted, talented advisors were listened to, and cities that surrendered voluntarily could prosper under Mongol rule. This careful balance of discipline, fear, and reward allowed the empire to grow sustainably. People learned that loyalty was valuable and that cooperation could bring both safety and opportunity. The empire's success was a direct result of Genghis Khan's ability to blend authority with strategy, creating a system that encouraged obedience without entirely relying on fear. Another key element of his legacy was the way Genghis Khan approached law and order. He understood that chaos and internal conflict could destroy even the most powerful empire. To prevent disorder, he implemented a legal code known as the Yasa. This code was not written in formal documents in the way modern laws are, but it was communicated and enforced consistently. It outlined the rules of behavior, expectations for loyalty, and consequences for violations. The Yasa applied to everyone within the empire, including nobles and common soldiers. By creating clear rules and ensuring they were followed, Genghis Khan maintained stability in a territory that stretched thousands of miles. Trade and cultural exchange were also significant parts of his legacy. The Mongol Empire, under Genghis Khan and his successors, became a hub for commerce and communication between East and West. Trade routes, including parts of what would later be known as the Silk Road, were protected and regulated. Merchants, travelers, and scholars were allowed to move more freely than in many other parts of the world at the time. This openness helped spread ideas, technology, and goods across continents. It also contributed to the wealth and influence of the empire. Genghis Khan understood that an empire was not only built through conquest, but also through connections, commerce, and communication. Education and administration were also influenced by his leadership style. Genghis Khan valued knowledge and talent, often incorporating scholars, engineers, and skilled artisans into his empire. These individuals contributed to the efficiency, innovation, and cultural richness of the Mongol territories. By recognizing the importance of intelligence and expertise, Genghis Khan ensured that his empire was not only strong militarily, but also capable of growth and development in other areas. This aspect of his legacy shows that he was not simply a conqueror, but also a leader who understood the benefits of knowledge, organization, and skill. Genghis Khan's use of fear, which had been a critical part of his early strategies, continued to influence his empire even after many regions were conquered. Leaders and populations understood the consequences of disobedience, and this understanding helped maintain control. However, he also learned to balance fear with fairness. Cities that cooperated could thrive, and people who were loyal were rewarded. This combination of fear, respect, and opportunity became a defining feature of his empire. It showed that power could be both protective and instructive, guiding people toward loyalty and stability rather than relying solely on intimidation. Even after his death in 1227, Genghis Khan's influence remained strong. His sons and grandsons continued to expand the empire, building on the foundation he had established. They respected his strategies, laws, and organizational methods while adapting them to new circumstances. The systems he created for governance, communication, and military organization persisted for decades, influencing regions far beyond Mongolia. His descendants became rulers of one of the largest continuous empires in history, demonstrating the enduring strength of his vision and methods. Historians have often debated Genghis Khan's legacy, recognizing both the brilliance of his leadership and the harshness of his methods. On one hand, he is remembered as a strategic genius who united tribes, built an efficient and disciplined army, and created systems of governance that lasted for generations. On the other hand, his campaigns caused significant destruction, and the fear he used to maintain control left lasting marks on populations and cultures. This duality makes him one of history's most fascinating figures. He was a leader who achieved greatness, but also reminded the world of the costs of extreme power. One of the most important lessons from Genghis Khan's life is the role of vision in leadership. From his early struggles as Temujin to the creation of a vast empire, he demonstrated that effective leadership requires more than strength or ambition. It requires careful planning, insight into human behavior, and the ability to balance fear, respect, and reward. Genghis Khan's ability to combine these elements allowed him to achieve what few others could: a unified empire that stretched across continents and influenced the world for generations. His legacy also includes the idea that leadership and governance are inseparable from responsibility. While he was capable of extreme actions, he understood that the consequences of these actions could affect not only his enemies, but also his allies and the future stability of the empire. By learning from both successes and mistakes, he adapted his strategies over time. This ability to evolve and refine his approach was critical in transforming temporary victories into a lasting empire. Genghis Khan's story demonstrates that leadership is an ongoing process, requiring constant learning, adaptation, and foresight. Trade, culture, and communication under Genghis Khan also set the stage for future global connections. The Mongol Empire provided a level of stability that allowed ideas, technologies, and goods to flow across regions. Cities under Mongol rule often became centers of learning, trade, and administration. Scholars, merchants, and travelers contributed to the growth of knowledge and exchange of culture. This aspect of his legacy shows that even a leader known for military conquest can also create conditions for growth, development, and cross-cultural understanding. The military strategies and organizational systems established by Genghis Khan were studied and admired for centuries. Generals and leaders in later periods recognized the brilliance of his approach to warfare, discipline, and governance. His methods of organizing armies, integrating conquered populations, and managing large territories influenced military and administrative strategies far beyond his own empire. The effectiveness of his systems highlights the intelligence and innovation behind his reputation. Perhaps most importantly, Genghis Khan's legacy demonstrates the complexity of power. He combined elements that are often seen as opposites: fear and respect, punishment and reward, destruction and creation. His life shows that leadership is not simple, and that the actions of a powerful figure can have both immediate and long-term consequences. The Mongol Empire was built on careful planning, strategic thinking, and the ability to influence both allies and enemies. This combination of qualities ensured that Genghis Khan's impact would be felt long after his death, shaping the history of Asia and beyond. Even today, Genghis Khan is remembered as a figure of extraordinary influence. In Mongolia, he is celebrated as a unifier and a national hero. Across the world, historians study his strategies, his approach to leadership, and the consequences of his campaigns. His life provides insights into the power of vision, the importance of discipline and organization, and the complexities of leadership on a massive scale. While his methods were sometimes extreme, the lasting impact of his ideas, systems, and empire demonstrates that greatness is often accompanied by challenges, responsibilities, and difficult choices. In the final analysis, Genghis Khan's legacy is a mixture of achievement, innovation, and caution. He demonstrated that one person's vision and determination could transform a fragmented region into a unified empire. He combined intelligence, strategy, and psychological insight to achieve remarkable success. At the same time, the consequences of his extreme methods remind us that leadership carries responsibility, and that the use of fear and power must be balanced with wisdom, foresight, and consideration for the future. The story of Genghis Khan is ultimately one of vision, strategy, and enduring influence. His empire changed the course of history, connecting regions, people, and cultures in ways that had never been done before. His methods, while sometimes extreme, were carefully calculated to maintain control, ensure loyalty, and create order. His ability to balance fear and reward, punishment and opportunity, destruction and growth allowed him to build an empire that influenced generations. Genghis Khan's legacy serves as a powerful reminder that leadership is both a responsibility and an opportunity, requiring courage, intelligence, and the ability to shape the world through both strategy and vision.